Hello, everyone. I'm Rodrigo, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this episode of EncoraTalks, where we'll be discussing about how to create a scalable factory for companies to adopt AI and become an AI-driven company for the future. Um, First and foremost, I'll be introducing myself, and then I will walk you through some of the content that we'll be covering today over the next 30 minutes. We'll be talking about challenges companies are facing when adopting AI and scaling that AI adoption. And also we'll be talking about some of the opportunities and how companies can go ahead and start adopting AI. As I mentioned, my name is Rodrigo Vargas, and I'm the VP of AI and LLM engineering for Encora. Been in the IT industry for a bit more than 20 years. I'm a computer scientist myself, but I've been deeply involved in the AI domain for a long time. And my main interest is to understand the current state of the technology, the future that the technology is enabling for all of us, and how to safely and responsibly adopt that technology in our day-to-day and make sure that we're able to reshape how we do things in such a way that AI becomes an assistant, an enabler, and not necessarily something that will cause harm to humanity. That's my main goal, and you'll see as we move along through this webinar that some of the content that we will be talking about is not necessarily specific to technology, but it's also specific to people, culture, and how we drive the change management aspect of AI adoption. These are some of the topics that we'll be covering. As I mentioned, I want to first start by describing what's an AI-first organization. What are the specific elements that make up an AI-first organization? And then we'll quickly move to understanding what are the challenges companies are facing for adopting AI, how to build an AI factory, what is an AI factory, and we'll be wrapping up by describing some of the best practices that companies can pursue when adopting AI. So let's get started. The first thing we'll want to discuss is, what's our point of view on what's an AI an AI first organization. And there are some preconceived ideas, some established paradigms on how we engage with computers, the human-computer interaction that has been established for quite some time now. It's been long enough where we learned that interacting with computers meant typing in a keyword, using a mouse. There's been some progress on drawing pads and speech-enabled interfaces, but ultimately what we've learned over the past 20, 30, 40 years is to interact with computers using keywords and mouse as a primary interface for that interaction. We're also seeing that the interaction is happening through applications that software engineers, developers create. Those applications have created this app-centric world where we've seen predominantly grow with the introduction of smartphones, tablets, smart devices. Everything happens through an application. Applications, again, act as an abstraction of a specific problem that needs to be solved. And it's providing a blueprint, it's providing a guide for us humans to accomplish things using computers. The future is something that we cannot tell for sure and how it will shape up. But one of the things that we're seeing with the newest advancements of the technology is that we will probably feel more natural. The interaction will necessarily happen through these physical devices. It will happen, using the the same forms that we use to communicate between each other. So we will probably start to see that these conversational interfaces will become more common. We will start to interact with computers more and more using our voice. We have seen those use cases already happening. If you have smartphones, you probably use those. And we also see that new generations already use those interfaces more than people that started using computers in the 90s and in the early 2000. So we see a world where AI will blur that interaction between humans and computers, and will open up a new world of possibilities on how we interact. There will be some cognitive interfaces also coming up. We've seen some progress and experiments happening in the area, but the AI first world that we see is less and less about those physical devices that we've get to know for the last 22 to 30 years. And that means that we might see also a huge shift in that app-centric world. We might not be very used to interact with computers via applications. Computers will probably be able to define how to resolve the problem statement that we're telling them to resolve, and come back to us with the solution, whether that means in voice, text, or whatever other format. But we might see that happening in the near future. So there's a huge shift on the way that even computer engineers, software engineers, developers will do their work. An AI-first organization, it's kind of an organization that will blend these three big domains together. Technology, of course, is what's been enabling this AI revolution. Then there's data, which is also driving this AI revolution. But it's also people, how we engage with the technology, how we leverage this data, how we go ahead and remove the silos that currently exist on data, and how companies will be able to blend the three together in such a way that those silos are completely removed, and that the AI agents and systems that will power up the new AI world will be holistic enough and to solve any problem that we present at them. And this is the real challenge. An AI-first organization needs not only to worry about the technology, needs to worry about the cultural shift, the mindset shift that happens with people when interacting with new technology, especially if we are completely reshaping how we interact with this technology, as explained before. If the interfaces, if the interactions will be completely different, then working with people, reskilling, upskilling them, learning how to rethink how we do things will become more important. And the data itself, we live in a world where there's a lot of data being generated every single second. And so being able to tap into all that data, make a sense of it, and be able to tie it into the organization in such a way that it blends nicely and smoothly together with the rest of the ecosystem will create that AI-first organization. And obviously, this all sounds kind of utopian, probably, but there are some things that we've started to see that make us believe that the future might be just around the corner. But there are some challenges before that happens. And moving past the hype and noise that LLMs, Gen AI have created, it's very important if you want to start realizing the value that is being promised. probably 80 to 90% of the proof of concepts, experiments, pilots, early MVPs that companies have been developing with this new technology is not making to production. And this is a number that can be seen from two different angles. On one side, you'll get people talking about that technology is a failure, or that the technology is not delivering up to the expectations. But then we have the other side of the equation, which is experimentation is what drives innovation. So it's not necessarily bad that 90% of the proof of concepts do not make it to production. It just means that we're helping the landscape to evolve. We're helping the company, the ecosystem, to understand where AI adds value, what needs to be fixed, what are the gaps that need to be covered. And we've been quickly seeing that the iterations between different model versions, between tools, it's quickly reducing. It in previous years, it took years, even months, to see a next iteration of a new version. With models, we are seeing that the time it takes to produce a newer model, a newer tool with a higher degree of capabilities is decreasing. So 90%, at least in my mind, it's a good number from the perspective of acceleration of experimentation, acceleration of innovation. And that is huge also, because that allows us to understand the challenges and address them really quickly. And here are some of the challenges that companies and organizations are typically experiencing when not only adopting and experimenting with the technology, but also when scaling these solutions. When they understand that they have achieved and realized some sort of value and they just want to scale that, then there are some challenges that start to surface at that point in time. The main challenge is skills, is having the right skills in the organization in order to effectively deploy and scale AI-based solutions. The AI revolution has caused some scarcity on the available talent that can accelerate that adoption. Then we also find that there's not enough training material out there, as the field is rapidly evolving, as the status quo is continuously being disrupted. Then the learning content needs to catch up. And right now, there are certain areas in the domain that for business users primarily, you won't be able to find high quality or enough content to train especially business people. And this is a challenge. Because then if you add the fact that there's not enough AI skilled people to drive innovation, then there's less people driving, that require upskilling. And then there's also a lack of domain maturity. I talked earlier about, for example, the paradigms that we're using to build software these days. But the truth is that building an AI first company requires AI first capabilities, requires AI first technologies, and requires to understand what are the best practices, and they don't yet exist. Why? Because we don't have the maturity in order to have accumulated enough failure in our experiments in order to come up with what we believe as an industry are best practices to create these sort of systems. Another challenge is identifying where the value is, or even realizing the value out of the investment. A lot of organizations rushed and started doing a lot of things with AI, and that's good. And rush might not be the right word here, but it's the fact that these investments were done without necessarily considering what was the real expectation or managing the expectations internally. And the truth is that most of the experiments are being driven, or were being driven, by technical teams. And then these teams were not necessarily considering some of the impacts that AI bring to organizations. So if LLMs were being introduced into a given process, how will these teams be evaluating those outputs? How will they enable the organization to trust those outputs? So those evaluations, evaluation frameworks, evaluation data sets were not there yet, and that caused decision makers, business people to be hesitant and reluctant to adopt those tools, just because they were not being able to fully trust what they were seeing. And that implied that the value of these tools, the investment that were made to create them, were not realized because people were not using it. So that ties back to the earliest strategy. What's the strategy for adopting AI? Is it just experimenting for the sake of experimenting, or is it, for example, let's integrate AI just because the competitors are integrating AI? So that's not necessarily a strategy. That's probably kind of a driver to adopt AI. But given that no strategy was put in place, then ROI was not being specifically measured or accounted for. And that also caused that lack of strategy definition was causing companies to create silos. So different teams were experimenting with different technologies. Data silos were kept as silos. And so the underlying enabling technologies were not being consolidated. And that caused silos to be not only continuously created, but the silos that existed will continue to be reinforced. And then we have challenges on the people. I mentioned earlier about the challenges on change management, and the fact is that this is also one of the biggest challenges companies face. How do they work on infusing AI while at the same time convincing their talent pool that AI is here to help, to accelerate work, to improve productivity, and not necessarily to take on their jobs? And that also ties back to that strategy. It's how I'm seeing not only the value that the technology will bring to the table, but also how I will engage with my people and how I will take on their opinion, feedback to make sure that the investments that are being made really make a good impact on the work that people is doing. And I also mentioned that some of the work were being driven by engineering, and that lacked some alignment with business goals, business outcomes. And beyond these challenges, what companies are looking for are large-scale wins. We talk about generally low-hanging fruits, and so that has different connotations, different meanings. Low-hanging fruits, at least it's Encora's point of view, mean two things. It's high-value work, but at the same time, work that can be done fast, and that can help provide the visibility to the organization that the technology is really providing value. So large-scale wins is what companies are after. They're looking to really see huge impacts when applying AI. And that also requires a mindset shift that I mentioned earlier also. It's about completely wiping our mind and memories on what we've been typically doing, and completely rethinking how problems should be resolved should we have the right tools in an AI first world. So forgetting about typical paradigms, forgetting about the typical solutions, the typical best practices on solving problems, and how can we start with a blank screen, a blank whiteboard, blank mind, and rethink how things should be addressed. It's one of the biggest challenges also that we're facing, because we all come back to the things that we know, and with AI, it's a completely new world, and we need to rethink things. The typical outcomes that companies face when pursuing this approach is, again, silos. There are a lot of silos being created. So this is a huge roadblock for scaling. We understand that, and this is a term that has been coined already in the industry. There's no AI without data. So one of the biggest promises of AI is the value that it unlocks. But what probably not many people is saying is that that value really relies on how the AI tools, agents, systems are really using the data. And so if data is siloed, if it's not connected, if relationships cannot be established, then the value wouldn't be that large scale value that companies are looking for. Then there's a narrow vision also on the value that the technology unlocks. Why? Again, because people is generally thinking the way they've been typically thinking about solving issues. If a new company is starting to develop or starting in a modernization journey to take their systems and modernize them, to take them to a new future state that will serve their purposes for the next 20, 25 years, then I'll say, and again, this is my own point of view, that leveraging, using the current set of best practices, the current set of UX or user journey interaction paradigms is probably a mistake, because the world that we live in will be completely reshaped in the next 3 to 5 years. And so we need a broader vision on where we're going. We need to probably establish a foundational vision on what AI will enable and work backwards. And if not, creating the system, modernizing the system to behave or to be an AI first solution, then we at least need to have that end state in mind, so that whatever it is that we design today, that we invest in today, is prepared for those major shifts as they become available. And then the other big outcome that companies are getting, and this ties back to the ROI and lack of strategy, is marginal gains. They're not seeing the huge gains that have been promised to them. And the reason behind this is just because there's no strategy. There's no clear procedure or framework to go after the high value use cases. Teams generally are locked into working on the use cases that are easier to work with, but accounting for business value is not in the radar. It's not something that they've been factoring in. So yes, they move forward, they produce something that really works, but then when deployed or when willing to be deployed within the company, the gain is marginal. It's not that huge win. And that causes two things as well. One is overspending, because again, there's more than is being invested than the value that is being realized out of these use cases. And second is that companies adding unnecessary complexity to their already complex underlying ecosystem of technology. So it's causing a lot of fragmentation also on the technology itself. It's causing different business functions and business leaders to go after what they think is the right solution, and that creates fragmentation, because they might have a budget and they might be willing to integrate tools within their own domain without worrying about the rest of the business functions doing the same thing with different tools, or even with the same tool, but not cross-pollinating the lessons learned, best practices that they've been learning about. And so that takes us to what is an AI factory. And there are different definitions, but in my mind, well, a factory, it's generally, and I generally see it as a manufacturing. Manufacturing factory. If you take the analogy of a car factory, you have three distinct and highly differentiated elements. On one side, you have technology, you have robots, you have systems, you also have procedures, processes that govern how these machines work, but you also have people that is actually governing the work, not necessarily doing it, because technology might have picked up most of that work already, but there are humans also doing a lot of that work. So these three highly differentiated components, how they fit together, it's what makes up a factory. And so when we discuss about software factory, it's basically the same thing, but in a more abstract way. We're not producing tangible goods. We're producing software, which is in the intangible domain. So we need to start asking a few questions. Why do I need an AI factory or a software factory with AI capabilities? What's the current state of the organization? What's the current state of the tech stack, of the skills? And what should I do to effectively start creating something that will be useful in the years to come? And how do I start? And so in a factory, it's no more than taking the building blocks that we are already know and assembling them in such a way that serves a purpose. And what's the purpose? In my mind, in Encora's point of view, is it's pursuing a value-driven adoption, and that means putting value, business value, as first criteria to drive decisions, because of two reasons. One is that we really need to make sure that we move past that hype and noise of the technology. We are sure, and it's a fact, that the technology will be very disruptive. It's already been disrupting in a lot of domains and fields. So it's a matter of understanding where that technology fits in my organization and unlock that value. But then I first need to be able to define what that value is. And a factory by itself, it's again assembling those building blocks in such a way that this value is realized. In the world of software and AI, and AI, companies will probably already have a baseline foundation of technology, people, and processes. And so AI does not need to be seen as a completely different technology that will come in and disrupt everything that I have. A good factory will seamlessly integrate these AI components, while at the same time rearranging some of the components that already exist and prioritizing some others so that adoption is effective. And let me tell you an example. If companies are running already on a major hyperscaler or public cloud, such as AWS or Azure, so building blocks are already there. AI, it's about provisioning a new set of services, but then it's the experienced people, the experienced talent pool that will be able to direct teams, stakeholders, decision makers towards making the necessary adjustments so that those new services serve the right purpose. And what the right purpose is, I'm going to discuss that in the next couple of slides. Establishing an AI factory, again, I like to oversimplify things, but at the end of the day, it's about understanding where we are. What's the current state? And probably most companies will, when seeing this slide, will probably say, I'm level 1, I'm level 2, which is the maturity level. Is what's the level of adoption of AI within my organization? And most companies are really experimenting or have already deployed some use cases in internal production and already leveraging the value in very specific business functions. But going to a level where AI is deeply infused across all business functions, it's already integrated into all key business processes, it's a huge lift. And it's a huge lift because of the things that I discussed earlier, but mainly because of the cultural shift, ethical shift, and ownership shift that happens within the organization. And you can see that this is not necessarily tied to technology. And the technology enablement part of creating an AI factory is the easy part. The most complex and challenging part is being able to create that strategy, understand where we are at, and how will we get from level 1 or level 2 to level 3, 4, and even 5. And this generally takes years. So that's why building a factory that will allow an organization to incrementally move in a specified timeline or over time for the next 2 to 3 years into really unlocking the value of AI is the hard part. Generally, this all starts with setting up the right talent pool with the right skills. And I mentioned earlier that one of the biggest challenges is the lack of AI skills within the organization. And this is generally seen as the key inhibitor for Gen AI adoption. So this is the one area where companies should start, where that means upskilling people, where that means bringing people from the outside with the right skills, or where that means partnering with the right company to bring in those skills. But then as the company starts experimenting and understanding the value of technology, then a few things need to happen. Most importantly, understanding where the company wants to be, what's the value proposition, how will be shifted by AI, and that will allow the company to establish that roadmap. What we see here is the Encora's AI framework, or Engineer for AI framework, which covers the different aspects that we believe are key to a successful AI adoption. And I've covered a few of them: roadmap, change management, ROI and investment, talent and upskilling. I've also briefly discussed about the underlying data foundation and technology foundation, which is key. And but there are also others that I haven't discussed. For example, how AI plays a role in the company and in the industry I'm operating in, whether or not I'm a highly regulated industry, and whether or not I need to consider the ethical risks of using AI, and how AI will be used internally and externally to serve my customers. What's the value proposition and how it will change? How will AI drive value to the company? And how can it be used to drive operational efficiency? But most importantly, how can I build also an ecosystem of partners and vendors that will complement those core skills that I don't have and that the company will not necessarily need to build? And at the end of the day, you've probably seen this slide already somewhere else using different names, but at the end of the day, this is the summary of what an AI factory looks like at a conceptual level. We can, depending on the nature of the company, drill down on infrastructure and specifically name technologies, components, partners, vendors that will fit in any of these boxes and in other box. But at the end of the day, we're trying to build 4 different layers for a factory. The enabling factors that are not necessarily about technology, they're about people. We've extensively talked about that. Infrastructure, which is the technology enablement. An enterprise data platform, which will aim to reduce silos and surface the right data at the right time for the right people by preserving confidentiality and addressing the sensitivity of that data. And then companies generally skip one layer and go to enabling use cases right immediately. And in the world of a non-AI first environment, they will think of apps. But what we're trying to do is to enable capabilities. And these capabilities will group the foundational functionality to enable that human computer interaction. We will not necessarily be building use cases in terms of applications. We'll be building use cases in terms of interactions, while the capabilities will be the backend working engine that will enable those interactions to happen. And so to start wrapping up the webinar, here are some of the best practices for scaling AI solutions. First and foremost, invest in upskilling to cover that foundational gap in skills. And that goes not only to engineering talent, but also to business leaders and business people. It's understanding how AI fits the world, the organization, what are the ethical risks of using it, how do I engage with the tools that are already out there. Foster an experimentation culture. This is the only way that upskilling that happened will be able to be consolidated and come and address the common knowledge of how AI can bring value to the company itself. Establish a framework to understand what value means for the organization, so that framework can be used when creating the roadmap for adoption. Understand, and this ties to the upskilling, understand costs so that you don't overspend in the experimentation phase. Start addressing silos in data early on in the process. Most companies already have silos, so the longer you wait, the more challenging it will become. And AI in the future with a siloed data environment won't work. So it's something to start working on right now. Realize value progressively. It's not that you'll invest a lot of money and start driving value out of one single engagement. This is an incremental approach that needs to happen over the course of many years. Focus on those foundational enablers of technology. Decide quickly what will support you, but build in such a way that you can switch as you move along and as new technologies emerge. And this is our own point of view. Really define and swear by a value-driven approach. Otherwise, you will find yourself not really realizing the value of the technology. Some key takeaways. I'll keep it short. Focus on data literacy and enterprise capabilities by upskilling, selecting the right partner, building the right ecosystem, and strengthening that foundational layer of the factory. Decide where you want to be as a company. Either you wait for others to establish the best practices and the path to follow, and you will jump into that train, or you become a disruptor and start experimenting and defining the path forward for your company and for others to follow. And most importantly, take action. With AI, it's about creating, at least on our side, create a safe environment that your personnel can use to experiment, to learn, and to start leveraging the technology. And with that, I thank you. I want to express my sincere gratitude for joining this webinar today. I encourage you to go visit Encora's website, subscribe to our YouTube channel. There are a lot more content there that you can use to dig deeper on some of these topics that we covered today. There are a few questions that we'll be answering. How companies typically start their journey in GenAI? And this is a typical question. Most companies have already started their journey on GenAI. They just haven't really realized that or think about that. But the right way to start, as I mentioned earlier, is experimenting. Of course, it needs to be a guided experimentation phase. It needs to serve a purpose and it needs to be time frame. Why? Otherwise, you'll find yourself experimenting for months and even years. So the best way to start is to establish a policy because it's good to enable the staff to experiment by themselves, capture feedback, and build on top of that. But then you need to provide some guiding principles, hopefully guidance on tools that should be and should not be used so that you can protect the company's data and reputation. So it's experimentation, but tied with a policy and a framework in place so that you have a longer term vision on what to expect from that experimentation phase. How to safely adopt GenAI within organizations? And this is a great question because I kind of mentioned earlier about safe adoption. And by safe adoption, I mean, and this ties back also to the previous question, is that experimentation phase should probably, and we encourage companies to enable a safe environment for experimentation. And that safe environment, it's really simple. It's the company provisioning a set of tools, advising which tools should be used and which tools should not be used and why, so that people really understands the implications of using tools that are not meet approved or that they form their own criteria on also their own personal domain when to engage and when not to engage with these tools, but also a policy. So that people knows what to share, what not to share. And then the third thing is a safe environment is a company self-contained a set of tools and access to models and environments where they can experiment without worrying on what is being done, what is being shared. The company can create that even if they're already addressing the need for training the people and understanding what needs to be shared and whatnot. And the last one, how to build Gen AI capabilities within my company. I briefly covered this earlier, and there are 3 simple ways companies can go about doing this. One is the slowest path to building capabilities is to train the internal staff. That can obviously be accelerated by looking for content, but as I also mentioned earlier, there's not enough content or not enough quality. There's a lot of really basic content that you can get you started, but you really need a lot of bandwidth from your people to really make progress on the extent of the art of the possible when engaging with the technology. But that's one path. Second path is hire someone with that experience that will allow the company to move faster. And the third, which is probably the best way to accelerate adoption, but also to bring in a lot of accumulated knowledge, it's to engage with a partner, a business partner that has already gone through that experimentation phase, that already has some knowledge accumulated, has a point of view, understands where the technology is going, and that will probably drive the best results when it comes to speed and quality of the adoption without overspending in areas that make no sense for the company. So that accumulated experience is a great way to start, especially if the company already has some ideas on where AI can fit the organization, and they just need someone to help them move faster. So with that, I thank you for joining this webinar. And again, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go visit our website. There are a lot more content there that you can use to dig deeper on these topics. Thank you very much.